On February 6, 1922, the Washington Treaty was signed. As a result, with the exception of Mutsu, all Japanese capital ship construction was halted. Under the treaty, though, each signature could convert into or complete two capital ships as aircraft carriers, up to 33,000 tons, arguably 36,000 tons. Not wanting to waste the hulls, or even worse, fall numerically even more behind the US or British, Japan chose the first two Akagi-class battlecruisers. This was a very reasonable decision, as the hulls were big and fast. Excellent qualities for an aircraft carrier, as Hosho had shown by being neither. And if this treaty thing didn't work out, who knows? Now, I'm not suggesting the Japanese had plans to convert them back into battle cruisers despite the treaty's restriction against that. I'm saying it. Despite the ever-souring alliance, Japan once again went back to its old buddy England for help, along with the lessons learned from Hosho, and the British helped them. Not for free, of course. Then came the Great Kanto earthquake of 1923. In it, the hull of Akagi was badly damaged, so the battleship Kaga was substituted. But we'll get to that later. This left her sister to enter service in 1927 as the officially 27,300-ton Akagi. Nah, just kidding. She was really more like 32,000 tons. They lied. Get used to it. Being so heavily influenced by the British, she shared many of her British contemporaries' attributes, the most obvious being the multi-level hangars. This was only feasible due to the low minimum speeds of aircraft at the time. For example, the main fighter, the Nakajima A-1N, had a cruise speed of 95 miles per hour, a range of 230 miles, and an empty weight of under a ton. By the way, that's going to knock off the battleship as Queen of the Seas. Does everybody see why a lot of people were skeptical at the time? Anyway, I personally see where they were going with this. They had 3 hangars stacked, with a flight deck capping it off. The flight deck could recover aircraft. Meanwhile, fighters could fly off the middle deck, and bombers could fly off the lower deck using the 5-degree downward sloping deck to help get them up to speed. A third basement hangar was used for parts storage. No. It would have been nice if it worked that way, but no. First, remember the Japanese adopted the British practice of not warming up aircraft in the hangars. So, aircraft had to leave the hangar before being run up and launched. Second, the middle deck was in front of the top hangar with the bridge between them and was also flanked by the gun turrets. It was more of a platform than a continuous deck. Third, the middle hangar had 2 roll-up doors that aircraft had to maneuver through to get to the flight deck in front of the hangar. Fourth, they had no catapults. This means aircraft in the middle hangar had to be rolled out of the front of the hangar, run up, then could launch. Not that far above the water line, by the way. Aircraft on the middle deck had to angle around the bridge and guns, be run up, then could launch off an extremely short platform. Do we see the problems here? Especially once aircraft got heavier, requiring longer runways. She had 2 elevators. The rear one could service all 3 decks and the basement hangar, but the forward one was offset to starboard and could only do the flight deck and middle hangar so as not to interfere with the lower hangar. Yeah, this is turning into a nightmare of Rube Goldberg proportions. Of course, being conversions, the hangars and flight deck were superstructure built on top of the hull. Speaking of big guns, according to the treaty, carriers were allowed to have up to 10 8-inch guns. The U.S. used that option in a very realistic and practical way on the Lexingtons. Akagi More on that in a bit. Some armor was kept, but not nearly on the scale originally intended for a battle cruiser. Incredibly, she still used mixed oil and coal firing. This was mostly because Japan couldn't be sure of a contiguous oil supply in the event of war, even if it was more efficient. As it turns out, of course, those concerns were very well founded. Taking lessons from Hosho, she originally had no island, the ship being helmed from a bridge behind the middle flight off platform and in front of the upper hangar. To put this into perspective, it means as the helmsman was looking out the bridge window, he was looking at two 8-inch gun turrets at about 10 and 2 o'clock. During flight operations, planes were ranged right in front of him and then flown off. Awesome. Continuing the experimental nature of early carriers, she had two funnels that came out midship on the starboard side, one large and one small. The large one pointed downward while the smaller one pointed upward. This was in contrast to Kaga, which again we'll get to. Of course, this jungle gym carrier thing was totally unsatisfactory. So, in the 30s, she went in for major modernization. We'll get to that. Akagi was started December 16, 1920. Construction was halted February 6, 1922. She was damaged September 1, 1923 in the Great Kanto earthquake and was broken up in 1924. Akagi was started December 6, 1920. Construction was halted February 6, 1922. She was restarted November 19, 1923, and was completed March 25, 1927. Main armament was 10 200mm 50 caliber guns. 4 were in 2 twin turrets, one on either side of the middle flight deck. The other 6 were in single casemates, 3 on each side below the main deck level at the port quarter and starboard quarter. I'm not going to go over the logic of the medium guns again, but why they would put them that close to the water line, I can't help you. Secondary armament was 6 twin 120mm 45 caliber dual-purpose guns, 3 on each side midship at the upper hangar level. Armor was okay. Side armor was 152mm and covered the middle two-thirds of the hull, i.e. where turret 1 would have been through where turret 5 would have been. The armored deck was in the main hull and was 79mm, capping off the side armor. Turret and casemate armor was 25mm. Propulsion was provided by 19 boilers. She was a battlecruiser after all. 10 were oil-fired and vented to the large down-facing forward funnel. 9 were coal-fired and vented to the smaller up-facing rear funnel. These provided steam to 4 turbines, each running a propeller, to produce 131,200 horsepower. Maximum speed was 32 knots. She had 1 rudder. Her upper flight deck was 190.2 meters by 30.5 meters and had a longitudinal arrestor wire setup. Her middle deck was just 15 meters long by 25 meters wide, but of course the guns reduced this width. Her lower flight deck was 55.02 meters by 20 meters. Her upper and middle hangars were 100 meters by 22 meters and 5 meters high. The lower hangar was 20 by 20 by 4.25 meters. Her rear elevator was 12.8 meters by 8.4 meters. Her forward elevator was 11.8 meters by 13 meters and was offset to starboard. Aircraft complement was 60. In December 1932, the longitudinal arrestor wires were replaced with lateral ones. From October 1935 till August 1938, she probably to the relief of many, was heavily modernized to handle newer, heavier aircraft. Most obviously, gone were the gun turrets, middle and lower flying off decks. For some reason, though, the casemate guns were retained. The flight deck was extended to 249.2 meters by 30.5 meters, but still wood. While the basement hangar wasn't changed, the upper and middle hangars were extended to 130 meters by 22 meters by 5 meters high each and enclosed. Presumably, they weren't run all the way to the bow because of buoyancy issues. Her forward elevator was widened to 11.8 meters by 16 meters and could now service the upper and middle hangars. A new midship elevator was added that was 11.8 meters by 13 meters. The rear elevator was unchanged. Stronger arrestor wires were fitted. The 140mm dual-purpose guns were moved up a level to sponsons along the flight deck. An island was added to the flight deck midship, but on the port side for comparison to Kaga. Both of the funnels were trunked into one that faced downward. The boilers were changed to all oil-fired, which increased her power to 133,000 horsepower. Bulges were fitted to improve stability and regain lost buoyancy due to the increase in top weight. Displacement rose to 36,500 tons, but due to the more power, despite being now lighter and heavier, her speed remained about the same. Because of the increase in hangar space, aircraft capacity increased from 60 to 91, but normally she carried about 63. 21 fighters, 21 dive bombers, and 21 torpedo planes, plus spares. Other minor changes were made, mostly medium anti-aircraft, before her loss, but not much.